The day my husband threw me out of our home, it was raining. Not the kind of rain that comes with thunder and strong winds. It was soft, quiet, almost gentle. The kind of rain that makes people stay inside with a warm drink. I stood on our front porch with my 6-month-old daughter sleeping against my chest. One small diaper bag rested beside my feet. That was all I was allowed to take. Daniel didn't even look at us. He stood inside the doorway with one hand on the frame, as if he couldn't wait to close it. "You'll be fine," he said. His voice was calm, too calm. "As long as you stop depending on me." I stared at him, waiting for him to smile, waiting for him to say he was angry and didn't mean it, waiting for him to tell me to come back inside. Instead, he slowly closed the door. Click. That tiny sound was louder than any scream. I looked down at my daughter. She was sleeping peacefully, unaware that we no longer had a home. I kissed the top of her little head. "It's okay," I whispered, even though I had no idea if it was. Sometimes people ask me what hurt the most. Was it losing my husband? Was it becoming homeless? Was it raising a baby alone? No. The worst part was realizing that the man I loved had already stopped loving me long before that day. I just hadn't noticed. 5 years later, the same man stood in front of me. His mouth slowly fell open. He looked at me, then at the building behind me, then back at me again. His lips trembled. "You!" He couldn't finish the sentence, because the woman standing in front of him was no longer the frightened young mother he had abandoned. And everything he believed about me had been completely wrong. But before I tell you about that day, you need to know how everything began. My name is Grace. I grew up in a small town where almost everyone knew everyone else. Life wasn't exciting. It wasn't rich. But it was peaceful. My father repaired cars. My mother worked at the public library. Neither of them ever made much money. Still, I never felt poor. Our house was always full of laughter. Dinner was always eaten together. If someone had only one piece of bread, everyone shared it. My parents believed that kindness was worth more than money. They weren't perfect, but they loved each other. Growing up in that home made me believe that love could solve almost anything. Maybe that's why I ignored so many warning signs later. I met Daniel when I was 24. He had just started working for a construction company. He was confident, funny. He made every room feel brighter. At least that's what I believed back then. Our first date lasted almost 5 hours. We talked about childhood dreams, favorite movies, the places we wanted to visit someday. When he drove me home, he smiled and said, "I think I've been waiting for you my whole life." It sounded like something from a movie. I laughed, but deep inside I wanted to believe him. Over the next year, we became inseparable. He brought flowers for no reason. He called during his lunch breaks. He remembered little things I said, like my favorite ice cream, or how I hated driving in heavy rain. He made me feel important, seen, loved. When he proposed, I didn't hesitate. Of course I said yes. Our wedding wasn't expensive. We couldn't afford a fancy hotel or hundreds of guests. Instead, we rented a small community hall. My father cooked with friends from church. My mother made the centerpieces herself. Everything was simple. Everything was beautiful. I remember dancing with Daniel that night. He held my hand and whispered, "I promise you'll never have to worry." I believed every word. For the first 2 years, life felt almost perfect. We rented a little house near his job. Money was tight. Sometimes we counted coins before buying groceries. Sometimes we laughed about eating pasta 3 nights in a row, but we were together. That seemed enough. Then Daniel received a promotion. His salary nearly doubled. We celebrated with cheap pizza and sparkling cider. He hugged me tightly. This is only the beginning. And for a while, it really was. We moved into a larger house, bought used furniture, painted the walls together. Every weekend became another small project. Building shelves, planting flowers, hanging family pictures. When I found out I was pregnant, Daniel cried. Actual tears. He knelt beside me, placed both hands on my stomach. "I'm going to be the best father." Those words stayed with me for years. Sometimes promises sound beautiful, until life asks people to keep them. Pregnancy wasn't easy. I was sick almost every morning. Some days I couldn't even stand long enough to cook dinner. Daniel helped at first. He cleaned, he did laundry, he rubbed my back when I couldn't sleep. But slowly, little things began to change. He started coming home later. Work, he said, new responsibilities, more meetings. I believed him. Why wouldn't I? One evening I had dinner waiting. The food grew cold. 9 o'clock came, then 10. Finally, just before midnight, he walked inside. "I'm exhausted," he muttered. "I already ate." He went straight to bed. I sat alone at the kitchen table. The candles had burned almost completely away. It felt silly, but I cried quietly while putting the food into containers. It wasn't about dinner, it was about eating alone. Again. The next morning he apologized. He kissed my forehead. "I'll make it up to you," I smiled, because I wanted to believe tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow rarely was, weeks became months. His phone was always face down. He smiled at messages but never explained them. If I asked how work was going, his answers became shorter. "Fine. Busy. Nothing special." The conversations that once lasted hours now ended in minutes. I kept telling myself every marriage goes through difficult seasons. Maybe I was asking too much. Maybe he was simply tired. When our daughter Emma was born, she was tiny, only 6 pounds. She had the darkest little eyes I'd ever seen. The first time Daniel held her, he smiled, but something felt different. Not wrong, just distant. He loved taking pictures, but after a few minutes he handed her back. "I don't want to drop her." I thought he was nervous. Many first-time fathers are. I didn't worry, not yet. The first few months after Emma's birth were difficult. She cried often, barely slept. Some nights I stayed awake until sunrise, rocking her gently. Daniel began sleeping in the guest room. "I have work tomorrow. I need rest." Again, I understood, or at least I tried to. Soon, he stopped asking how my day had been. He didn't notice the dark circles under my eyes, or the laundry piled on the couch, or the fact that I hadn't brushed my hair until late afternoon. Motherhood was beautiful, but it was also lonely, especially when the person beside you slowly disappears while still living in the same house. One afternoon, my mother came to visit. She held Emma while I made tea. She watched me quietly for several minutes. Then she reached across the table and held my hand. "Grace, are you happy?" The question caught me off guard. I forced a smile. "I'm just tired." She nodded slowly, but mothers have a way of hearing the answers we never say aloud. Before leaving, she hugged me longer than usual. "If you ever need to come home, our door is always open." I laughed softly. "Mom, everything's okay." She kissed my forehead. "I hope so." After she left, I stood at the window holding Emma. I watched my mother's car disappear down the street. For reasons I couldn't explain, I suddenly wished I had asked her to stay a little longer, because deep inside, something in my marriage had already begun to break. I just didn't know how close we were to the day that would change my life forever. The days began to blend together. Morning came before I was ready for it. Emma would wake up crying, and I would lift her from her little crib before the sun had fully risen. Some mornings, I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror and barely recognized myself. My hair was tied into a messy bun. There were dark circles under my eyes. My smile had disappeared so quietly that I couldn't remember the last time it had looked real. Still, every morning I whispered the same words to myself. "This is just a hard season. It will get better." I repeated those words so often that they almost sounded true. Daniel continued leaving early and coming home late. Sometimes he kissed Emma on the forehead before leaving. Sometimes he didn't even look into the nursery. At first I told myself he was simply tired. His company was growing. More responsibility meant longer hours. That was normal, wasn't it? One Friday evening I decided to surprise him. Emma had finally fallen asleep after hours of crying, and I spent almost 2 hours cooking his favorite dinner. Roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, fresh bread. The same meal I had made on our first wedding anniversary. I even lit 2 small candles, not because we needed romance, just because I missed feeling like husband and wife. 7 o'clock came, then 8, then 9. I looked at my phone, no message, no call. Finally, at nearly 10:30, I heard his truck pull into the driveway. Relief washed over me. I hurried to the front door before he even unlocked it. "You're home," he barely smiled. "I told you I had work." "You didn't." "I thought you knew." I looked toward the dining table. "I made dinner." He glanced at it for less than a second. "I already ate." 3 simple words, then he walked past me without another glance. I stood there listening to his footsteps disappear upstairs. The candles continued burning. The food slowly became cold. Again, I sat down alone, not because I was hungry, because I couldn't stop staring at the empty chair across from me. It had become a habit, eating by myself, talking to myself. crying quietly after Emma had gone to sleep. The silence inside our home felt heavier every week. A few days later, I tried talking to him, not arguing, just talking. "Daniel," he looked up from his phone. "What? I miss you," he sighed. "I'm sitting right here." "No," I smiled sadly. "Your body is here. But it doesn't feel like you are." He rubbed his forehead. "I work all day. I come home exhausted. What else do you want from me?" "I don't want more. I just want my husband back." For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Finally, he stood. "I don't have the energy for this." Then he walked upstairs. The conversation lasted less than 3 minutes. It stayed in my mind for weeks. Emma was almost 1 year old when I noticed something else. Daniel no longer wore his wedding ring every day. Sometimes he claimed he forgot it after showering. Sometimes he said it bothered him while working. I believed him. At least, I pretended to. One afternoon, I was folding laundry when his phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. I wasn't trying to invade his privacy. I only wanted to silence the sound so it wouldn't wake Emma. The screen lit up. A woman's name appeared, Rachel. The message was short. "Can't stop thinking about last night." My hands froze. My heart began pounding so loudly I could hear it. I stared at the screen for several seconds, then it went dark again. I didn't unlock the phone. I didn't read anything else. I simply stood there, trying to convince myself there had to be another explanation. Maybe it was about work. Maybe friends had gone out after work. Maybe, sometimes hope makes us create stories because the truth feels too painful. That evening I asked him carefully, "Who's Rachel?" His expression changed immediately. "Someone from work." I saw the message. "You shouldn't be looking at my phone." I wasn't. It lit up. He crossed his arms. "So now you don't trust me." I blinked in surprise. I asked one question, and I answered it. He picked up his keys. "I'm going for a drive." The front door slammed behind him. I stayed in the kitchen holding Emma while tears quietly rolled down my face, not because I had proof, because somehow he had made me feel guilty. Days passed, then weeks. Rachel's name never came up again, neither did the conversation. Life returned to its strange routine. Wake up, feed Emma, clean the house, wait for Daniel. Go to bed disappointed. Repeat. My parents visited often. They never criticized Daniel. They simply helped. My father repaired things around the house. My mother cooked meals and played with Emma. One afternoon, my father quietly asked, "Everything all right?" I smiled automatically. "Of course." He looked at me for a long moment, then he nodded. "If you say so." Parents sometimes know when their children are protecting someone who doesn't deserve it. I just wasn't ready to admit it. Christmas arrived. It had always been my favorite holiday. I decorated the house with lights. Emma laughed every time she saw the little Christmas tree sparkle. For a few days, I believed maybe the holidays would bring us back together. I wrapped Daniel's gift carefully, a leather wallet. Inside, I placed a tiny handwritten note. "No matter how busy life becomes, you'll always be my favorite place to come home to." Simple words, honest words. On Christmas morning, he opened the box. He smiled politely. "Thanks," that was all. No hug, no kiss, no note. Later that afternoon, I found the folded paper still inside the wallet. Unread, I quietly removed it before anyone else could see. That night, after everyone had gone home, I sat alone beside the Christmas tree. The lights blinked softly in the dark room. Emma was asleep upstairs. Daniel had gone to bed early. I held that tiny note in my hands, then I folded it again and placed it inside my journal. For some reason, I couldn't throw it away. A month later, things became worse. Daniel started criticizing everything I did. "The house is messy. You spend too much. You never have dinner ready on time. You've changed." Each sentence felt small, but together they slowly chipped away at my confidence. I began apologizing for things that weren't even my fault. "I'm sorry dinner is late. I'm sorry Emma cried all afternoon. I'm sorry I forgot to buy milk. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry." The words became part of my daily life. One evening, my best friend Hannah stopped by unexpectedly. She hadn't seen me in months. The moment she walked inside, she looked around the quiet house. Then she looked at me. "Grace, you don't look okay." I laughed softly. "I'm just tired." She gently touched my arm. "No, you're lonely." That word hit harder than I expected. Lonely? How could someone feel lonely while married? Yet that was exactly how I felt. After Hannah left, I couldn't stop thinking about what she had said. That night, I climbed into bed beside Daniel. He was already facing the other wall. There was less than a foot between us. It felt like miles. I wanted to reach for his hand. Instead, I quietly turned away too. Spring arrived. Emma had started taking her first steps. She laughed every time she managed 2 or 3 tiny steps before falling into my arms. Those moments became the brightest part of my life. I recorded every milestone, every smile, every little word. Daniel missed most of them. "She walked today," I told him one evening. "That's nice." I recorded it. "I'll watch it later." He never did. One Saturday morning, I suggested we spend the day together, maybe visit the park, have a picnic, take family photos. Daniel didn't even look up from his laptop. "I've got work." "It's Saturday." "So?" "Emma misses you." "I'm doing this for the family." Those words ended every conversation. Whenever I questioned his absence, he reminded me he was providing for us. Eventually, I stopped asking. One rainy afternoon, I opened the mailbox and found an envelope from the bank. At first, I thought it was another monthly statement. Instead, it was a notice about a new account, one I had never seen before. Daniel's name was on it, mine wasn't. I stared at the paper, confused. When he came home that evening, I showed it to him. "I don't understand." His jaw tightened. "It's just a business account. You never mentioned it. I don't have to report every financial decision. We're married. I know we're married." His voice had become cold. "But not everything belongs to both of us." Those words settled over the room like ice. Not everything belongs to both of us. I looked at the man standing in front of me, the man who once promised I would never have to worry, for the first time. A quiet fear settled deep inside my heart, not because of the bank account, not because of the money, because I suddenly realized something much more frightening. The man I had married was slowly becoming a stranger, and I had no idea how much worse things were about to become. Looking back now, I sometimes wonder why I stayed. People ask that question when they hear my story. Why didn't you leave sooner? Why didn't you fight back? Why didn't you see what was happening? The answer is simple. Because love doesn't disappear overnight. It fades so slowly that you don't notice the darkness until you're standing in it. Every morning, I woke up believing that maybe today would be different. Maybe Daniel would smile again. Maybe we would eat dinner together. Maybe Emma would make him laugh the way she made me laugh. I kept hoping. Hope can be beautiful, but sometimes it keeps you in places that are quietly breaking you. Emma was almost 18 months old. She had started talking in tiny sentences. Mama. Gi, bird. Every new word felt like a little miracle. One evening she stood near the front window waiting for Daniel. Every time headlights passed our house, she clapped her hands. Dada, I smiled gently. Maybe, sweetheart. Another car drove by. Dada? No, baby, she kept waiting. Nearly an hour later, Daniel finally came home. Emma ran toward him with the happiest smile. Dada! She wrapped both little arms around his leg. Instead of picking her up, he carefully moved her aside. Not now. I'm tired. He walked upstairs without looking back. Emma stood in the hallway, confused. She looked at me, then at the stairs, then back at me again. Her smile slowly disappeared. She didn't cry. She simply walked back into my arms. I held her tightly. She rested her tiny head on my shoulder. That night, after she fell asleep, I cried harder than I had in months, not for myself, for her. No child should have to wonder why their father keeps walking away. The distance between Daniel and me continued growing. Sometimes days passed without a real conversation. We lived in the same house, shared the same address, but it no longer felt like a marriage. It felt like two strangers paying the same mortgage. One Saturday morning, I found an old photo album while cleaning the closet. It was filled with pictures from our first years together, our first apartment, our wedding, our honeymoon at a small lake we could barely afford. Daniel looked different. Not older, kinder. His eyes were full of warmth. I smiled through tears as Emma climbed onto my lap. Who's that? She asked. That's Mommy, she giggled. And him? That's Daddy. She looked closely at the picture, then looked toward the empty living room. Daddy happy? I stared at the photo. Yes, he used to be. A week later, Hannah invited me out for coffee. It was the first time I had left the house alone in months. Emma stayed with my parents. The little cafe was quiet. Soft music played in the background. For a while we talked about ordinary things, then Hannah reached across the table. Grace, I need to ask you something, I nodded. Are you afraid of your husband? The question surprised me. No, she waited. Are you happy? I looked down at my coffee. The answer refused to come. Instead, I started crying. Not loudly, just quietly. The kind of crying that comes after holding everything inside for too long. Hannah moved her chair beside mine. You don't have to pretend anymore. For nearly an hour I told her everything. The silence, the late nights, Rachel, the criticism, the loneliness. When I finished, Hannah didn't speak immediately. Finally, she said something I will never forget. Grace, you've been carrying this marriage by yourself. Those words stayed with me long after I left the cafe. Maybe she was right. Maybe I had been trying to save something Daniel had already given up on. That evening, I decided to try one last time. Not to accuse him, not to fight, just to be honest. Daniel was sitting in the living room scrolling through his phone. I sat beside him. We need to talk. He sighed. What now? I don't think we're okay. We're fine. No, we're surviving. He placed his phone on the table. So what do you want me to say? I want the truth. Are you unhappy? He looked away. I don't know. Do you still love me? Several long seconds passed. Then he shrugged. I don't know. 3 words, I don't know. I would have preferred the truth, even if it hurt. Instead, he gave me uncertainty. Somehow that hurt even more. The following month his business trips became more frequent, or at least, that's what he called them. 2 days, sometimes 3, then 4. Whenever I asked where he was staying, he answered quickly. The company booked the hotel. Don't worry about it. His suitcase became a permanent part of our bedroom floor. His phone never left his hand. He even started taking it into the bathroom. Every instinct inside me whispered that something wasn't right, but I still couldn't prove anything. One afternoon, my mother came over unexpectedly. She found me sitting on the kitchen floor while Emma played with wooden blocks beside me. Grace, I looked up. She immediately knelt beside me. What happened? I handed her one of Daniel's credit card bills. Several expensive restaurant charges, luxury hotels, jewelry stores. None of them made sense. We never went to these places. My mother's face grew serious. Have you asked him? He says they're business expenses. She looked at me carefully. And do you believe him? I opened my mouth, then closed it again, because for the first time, I honestly didn't know. That Friday Daniel called. I'll be home late. Another meeting. His voice sounded rushed. I simply answered, okay. After hanging up, I looked at Emma. She was coloring on the living room floor. An idea crossed my mind, one I almost ignored, but something inside me refused to stay silent. I called the hotel listed on the credit card statement. My hands shook as the receptionist answered. Good afternoon. I'm trying to reach my husband. I gave Daniel's full name. There was a short pause. I'm sorry, ma'am. We don't have any guest registered under that name. I thanked her and hung up. For several minutes I couldn't breathe. Maybe he was at another hotel. Maybe. There was always another maybe, until there wasn't. The truth arrived on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. Emma had fallen asleep after lunch. I was folding tiny baby clothes when the doorbell rang. A young woman stood outside. She looked nervous, almost embarrassed. Are you Grace? Yes. My name is Olivia. She looked down for a moment. I work with your husband. My stomach tightened. Can we talk? We sat on the front porch. Neither of us spoke at first. Finally, she whispered, I almost didn't come. But if I were you, I would want someone to tell me. I couldn't move. Olivia took a slow breath. Daniel has been seeing another woman. The world became completely silent. I stared at her, certain I had misunderstood. What? Her name is Rachel. They've been together for over a year. My heart stopped. A year, over a year, that meant, almost since Emma had been born. Olivia continued speaking through tears. I didn't know he was married. He told everyone he was divorced. I only found out last week. She handed me several printed photographs, restaurant dinners, holding hands, laughing, kissing. There was no misunderstanding anymore. No business meetings, no overtime, no excuses, only truth, cold, sharp, impossible to deny. I am so sorry, Olivia whispered. Then she quietly walked away. I remained on the porch long after she had gone. The photographs rested in my lap. Emma was still sleeping inside. The birds continued singing. Cars continued passing. The world hadn't stopped. Mine had. That evening I placed the photographs neatly on the dining table. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I simply waited. Daniel came home shortly after 8. He smiled as he entered. Then he saw the photographs. His smile disappeared instantly. Neither of us spoke. Finally, he looked at me. So? You know, I nodded slowly. I know. He closed his eyes for a moment, then, instead of apologizing, instead of denying it, instead of begging for forgiveness, he said the words that destroyed whatever hope I still had left. "I've been meaning to tell you. I just didn't know how." I stared at the man I had loved for nearly 8 years, and in that moment, I realized the marriage I had spent so long trying to save had already ended long before I knew it. I just hadn't been invited to the goodbye. People imagine betrayal as one loud moment, a door slamming, someone shouting. A dramatic goodbye, but the deepest heartbreak is often quiet. It sounds like two people sitting across the same table with nothing left to save. Daniel pulled out a chair and sat down. He looked tired, not guilty, just tired. He rubbed his hands together before speaking. "I wasn't planning for this to happen." I stared at him. "It already happened." He looked down at the photographs. "I didn't mean to hurt you." I almost laughed, not because anything was funny, because those words sounded so small compared to the pain they had caused. "You lied to me for over a year." He stayed silent. "You watched me raise our daughter while you built another life." Still nothing. Finally he whispered, "I wasn't happy." I nodded slowly. "I know, but you never told me." He leaned back in his chair. "I didn't want to fight. So instead, you chose another woman?" He closed his eyes. "I didn't plan it." For the first time that evening, anger rose inside me. Not loud anger, the quiet kind, the kind that comes after too many tears. You planned every lie. You planned every dinner, every hotel, every excuse. You planned all of it. His shoulders dropped. He had no answer. Neither of us spoke for nearly a minute. Finally, I asked the question that had been living inside me for months. "Did you ever love me?" He looked at me. "I did." The word hurt. Past tense. Not "I do," not "I still love you," just "I did." It felt like someone quietly closing the last door. That night we slept in separate rooms. I barely slept at all. Emma woke up just before sunrise. I picked her up and held her close. She rested her tiny head against my shoulder. Children have a way of sensing pain even when they don't understand it. She looked at me with sleepy eyes. "Mama sad?" I smiled through tears. "A little." She kissed my cheek, then wrapped her little arms around my neck. That tiny hug carried more love than I had felt in months. The next morning, Daniel acted as if everything could simply continue. He poured himself coffee, checked his phone, picked up his keys. "I'll be home late." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You think you're leaving for work?" He looked confused. "I have work." "No, you have a family." He sighed heavily. "I don't want Emma hearing us argue." "I'm not arguing. I'm asking you to choose." He stared at me, then quietly answered, "I already have." Those 4 words changed everything. He walked out the front door. I watched his truck disappear down the street. For the first time, I stopped waiting for him to come back. A week later, he officially asked for a divorce, not in person, through an email from his attorney. I read every word twice because it didn't feel real. Irreconcilable differences, division of property, custody arrangements. It reduced 8 years of marriage into a few cold pages. My hands shook so badly that I almost dropped them. My father happened to arrive a few minutes later. He found me sitting at the kitchen table. Without saying a word, he sat beside me. I handed him the papers. He read them quietly, then folded them. He looked at me. "You're coming home?" I shook my head. "This is Emma's home." "It was." He corrected me gently. "Not anymore." I still believed Daniel would be fair. After all, we had built everything together. The house, the savings, the furniture, our dreams. Surely he wouldn't leave his daughter with nothing. I was wrong. At the lawyer's office, Daniel barely looked at me. His attorney spoke most of the time. Because the house had been purchased mostly with Daniel's income, he wanted to keep it. The savings account, mostly his, the truck, his, several investments I didn't even know existed, his. I looked toward Daniel. "You're really doing this?" He avoided my eyes. "My lawyer says this is fair." Fair. That word echoed inside my head. For years I had stayed home raising our daughter, cleaning, cooking, supporting his career. Now somehow, none of that had value. The meeting ended without agreement. Outside the office, I finally stopped him. "Daniel," he turned around. "After everything, how can you do this?" He looked strangely calm. "You'll be okay." Those were the same words he had spoken on the day he closed the front door behind us. Only this time, I knew they weren't kindness, they were dismissal. Over the next 2 weeks, everything happened quickly. The court granted temporary arrangements. The house would remain with Daniel until everything was finalized. I had 30 days to leave, 30 days to pack an entire life. I packed slowly. Every room held memories. Emma's nursery. The marks on the kitchen wall showing how much she had grown. The garden we planted together. Every object reminded me of the woman who once believed this house would grow old with her. Sometimes I found myself standing still for several minutes, holding an old coffee mug, a family photo, one tiny baby shoe, not because I needed them, because I wasn't ready to say goodbye. On my final evening there, Emma toddled through the empty living room. Most of the furniture was already gone. She looked around with wide eyes. "Home?" I knelt beside her. "We're going somewhere new," she smiled. "Adventure?" I laughed through my tears. "Yes, an adventure." Children have a beautiful way of giving hope names. The next morning the rain began before sunrise. The moving truck wasn't coming. There wasn't enough furniture to justify one. Everything we owned fit into a few boxes, 2 suitcases, Emma's crib, a stroller, 1 diaper bag. That was our entire life now. Daniel watched from the hallway. He never offered to help, never carried a single box. I lifted Emma into my arms. She rested quietly against my shoulder. Before leaving, I looked around the house one final time. Not because I wanted to stay, because I wanted to remember the lesson. A beautiful house cannot hold together a broken marriage. I walked toward the front door. Daniel finally spoke. "You'll be fine." The exact same words. I looked at him for several seconds. Then I answered quietly, "I know." He seemed surprised. Maybe he expected me to beg, to cry, to ask him to change his mind. Instead, I simply walked outside. He closed the door behind us. Click. The sound was soft, but this time, it didn't break me, it set me free. My parents welcomed us without asking a single question. My mother had already prepared Emma's little bed. My old bedroom had been cleaned. Fresh flowers sat beside the window, nothing expensive, just love. That first night I cried into my pillow after Emma fell asleep. Not because I missed Daniel, because I felt like I had failed as a wife, failed as a mother. Failed at building the family I had promised my daughter. The next morning my mother quietly sat beside me on the porch. She handed me a warm cup of tea. After a long silence she smiled. "You know what I see?" I shook my head. "I see a woman who survived. I don't feel strong. You don't have to feel strong. You only have to keep going." Those words became my first step toward healing. I didn't know how we would survive. I had no job, very little money. A 2-year-old daughter depending on me. The future looked frightening, but for the first time in a very long while, I also felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace, because although my marriage had ended, the lies had ended too, and deep inside, without realizing it yet, a new life had already begun. People often believe healing happens all at once. They imagine one morning when the pain is simply gone. That never happened to me. Healing came quietly, one ordinary day at a time. The first year after my divorce was the hardest year of my life. Emma was only 2 years old. She needed everything. Food, comfort, stories before bed, someone to hold her when nightmares came. At the same time, I had to rebuild a life that no longer existed. My parents never complained. My father turned his old workshop into a little playroom for Emma. Every evening she would run toward him shouting, "Grandpa." He always opened his arms. "There's my favorite helper." Watching them together reminded me that family isn't always the people who hurt you. Sometimes it's the people who quietly stay. I knew I couldn't depend on my parents forever. One afternoon, I sat at the kitchen table with a notebook. I wrote down every skill I had: cooking, organizing, planning, taking care of children, customer service from my college job years ago. It wasn't much, but it was a beginning. The next morning, I started applying for work. Most places never called back. Some interviews ended the moment they learned I had a young child. One manager smiled politely. "We're looking for someone with more flexibility." I understood what he really meant. A single mother wasn't convenient. Each rejection hurt. But every evening I looked at Emma sleeping peacefully beside her stuffed rabbit. Then I reminded myself why I couldn't give up. Not for me, for her. 3 months later, a small bakery downtown offered me a part-time job. The pay wasn't impressive. The hours started before sunrise, but they were willing to work around Emma's daycare schedule. On my first morning, I arrived nervous. The owner, Mrs. Wilson, handed me a clean apron. "You'll do just fine." She was right. I loved the smell of fresh bread, the warm ovens, the quiet conversations with regular customers. For the first time in years, someone appreciated my work. Mrs. Wilson noticed everything. If I stayed late to help, if I smiled kindly at customers, if I learned something quickly. 6 months later, she promoted me to assistant manager. A year after that, manager, not because I was lucky, because I finally believed in myself again. Daniel called occasionally to speak with Emma. Sometimes he visited, sometimes he canceled. At first, Emma waited excitedly by the window, then disappointment became familiar. Daddy coming? I think so. Hours passed. He never arrived. She stopped asking. That broke my heart more than anything. Children eventually stop expecting what never comes. I never spoke badly about Daniel. No matter how angry I felt, Emma deserved to form her own opinions. Whenever she asked, "Does Daddy love me?" I always answered the same way. "Your father loves you in his own way." I never wanted my pain to become hers. As the years passed, life slowly became steadier. I rented a small apartment near Emma's school. It wasn't fancy. The kitchen was tiny. The floors creaked. The paint needed touching up. But every bill was paid by me. Every piece of furniture belonged to us. Every laugh inside those walls was real. The first night we moved in, Emma ran from room to room. "Mama, I have my own room." She jumped onto the little bed we bought secondhand. "It's perfect." I looked around the apartment, then smiled. She was right. It was perfect. Not because it was beautiful, because it was peaceful. Mrs. Wilson retired during my 4th year at the bakery. One afternoon, she invited me into her office. "I've been thinking." She slid a folder across the desk. "I'd like to sell the bakery." I laughed softly. "I could never afford this." She smiled. I wasn't finished. She explained that she believed in me. She would allow monthly payments, no impossible down payment, no unfair interest. She trusted me. I stared at the papers through tears. "Why me?" She reached across the desk and squeezed my hand. "Because you care about people. You can teach someone to bake. You can't teach kindness." 3 months later, I became the owner. The same woman who had once believed she would never survive alone now owned the little bakery that had saved her. Business wasn't easy. Some mornings I arrived at 4:30. Some nights I left after closing. Emma often sat in the corner after school doing homework while I counted receipts. Customers got to know her. "How's our little helper today?" She smiled proudly. "I'm helping my mom." Sometimes she arranged cookies. Sometimes she swept tiny crumbs from the floor. She loved being part of it. So did I. We weren't just building a business. We were building a life. 5 years passed faster than I expected. Emma turned 7. She became kind, funny, curious. She loved reading just like my mother. She baked cinnamon rolls with my father every Sunday. One afternoon, she looked at me while frosting cupcakes. "Mama?" "Yes." "Are we poor?" The question surprised me. I smiled. "No, we're not." She thought carefully. "Then are we rich?" I laughed. "We have enough." She nodded. "I think we're rich. Because we're happy." I kissed the top of her head. Children understand wealth better than adults sometimes. One rainy Tuesday morning, I was arranging fresh bread in the display window when a familiar voice spoke behind me. "Grace," I froze. Slowly, I turned around. Daniel stood there. He looked older. His shoulders slumped. Gray touched the edges of his hair. For a moment, neither of us spoke. He glanced around the bakery, the shelves, the customers, the employees greeting me warmly. "You own this place?" I nodded. "Yes." He looked almost confused. I didn't know." "I know." He lowered his eyes. "I heard about your bakery." I didn't believe it. Silence settled between us. Finally, he looked at Emma, who was helping decorate cookies. "She's gotten so big." "She has." He swallowed hard. "I've missed a lot." I didn't answer, because there was nothing left to say. Missed birthdays couldn't be returned. Missed bedtime stories couldn't be relived. Lost years stay lost. Daniel looked around again. "I thought." He stopped. "What?" "I thought you wouldn't make it." His honesty surprised me. I smiled gently. "For a while, I thought that too." He nodded slowly. Then he quietly admitted something I never expected. "Rachel left." I simply listened. She said I was never truly present. A sad smile crossed my face. I remembered sitting alone at dinner all those years. He continued, "I lost my job 2 years ago. I sold the house. Most of my savings disappeared." His voice sounded empty. "I spent years blaming everyone else. Then one day, I realized I had destroyed my own family. Tears filled his eyes. I was too proud to admit it. I am now. For the first time since our divorce, I saw genuine regret. Not excuses, not blame, just regret. He looked at me quietly. I owe you an apology. You deserved honesty. You deserved loyalty. You deserved better. He wiped his eyes. I'm sorry. The younger version of me had dreamed about hearing those words. Back then they would have meant everything. Now, they simply brought peace. I nodded. Thank you. He looked surprised. That's all, I smiled softly. I forgave you a long time ago, not because you deserved it, because Emma deserved a mother who wasn't carrying hate, and because I deserved peace. Neither of us spoke. The silence felt different now, gentler, lighter. Before leaving, Daniel walked over to Emma. She smiled politely. Hi. Hi, sweetheart. He looked unsure. I've made a lot of mistakes. She nodded. I know. Children are honest. He smiled sadly. I hope one day we can know each other better. Emma looked at me. I gave her a small nod. Then she looked back at him. We can try. Hope, simple, quiet, real. Daniel reached into his pocket and bought 2 cinnamon rolls. He paid full price. As he turned to leave, he paused at the door. I used to think success meant having the biggest house. He looked back at me. I was wrong. His eyes moved toward Emma, laughing with one of my employees. You built something I never understood. Then he walked away. I watched him disappear into the rain, just as he had disappeared from my life years before. Only this time, I didn't cry. That evening, Emma and I locked the bakery together. The streets were wet after another gentle rain. She slipped her little hand into mine. Mama, yes. Are you happy? I looked at the bakery lights glowing warmly behind us, at my daughter smiling beside me, at the life we had built from nothing. Then I answered honestly. I really am, she smiled. I knew it. As we walked home together, I thought about the woman standing on that rainy porch 5 years earlier. She believed her life was over. She believed being left behind meant she wasn't enough. She couldn't have imagined this moment. The little bakery, the peaceful home, the laughter, the strength she didn't know she had. If I could speak to that younger version of myself, I would tell her one simple thing. Sometimes the door that closes on you is the one that finally leads you home. Life doesn't always become easier. People don't always change. Broken promises don't always heal, but hearts do. Slowly, quietly, one ordinary day at a time. And sometimes the greatest gift isn't getting back what you lost. It's discovering that you were always stronger than you believed.